I'm Rachel Herndon Dunn, and welcome to a very special episode of This Week in Missouri Politics. Scott is obviously not here. He's been pretty busy being in the news. I hear he's hanging out on some oceanfront property in West Butler County writing a book. But I've got a few special guests for you to discuss, in particular, Scott Vaughn. I've got David Barkledge. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Scott Dickhouse, Palm Strategic. Thank you for joining.
Good to be here.
Patrick Lynn, Show Me Victories, Democratic Extraordinaire. Thank you.
Thank
Of
you.
course, Jeff Roida, author, candidate for Jeff County Executive. Thank you for joining us.
Glad to be part of this all-star cast.
Well, thank you very much for joining me, as for some reason I'm here in this chair, which is not where I expected to be today. Nonetheless, a couple of crazy things happened this week. And Scott, I'd like to start with you, because just Thursday evening actually, the House leadership came together with Senate leadership and they made an announcement.
Big announcement.
So they're going to have a special session
Yes.
May 18th, right after regular session.
And this is the first time in the history of the state that this has been invoked. The legislature calling themselves into a special session. In the past, the governor's called the legislature back, and they've done special sessions before, but they've had the authority to do this for, I believe, about 30 years, and it's not been done before. And they're calling themselves into a special session, which is not easy to do. 75% of the House, 75% of the Senate had to sign off on this. To get 75% of, a diverse group of people to agree on anything, I think really kind of points to the seriousness of what is going on in Jefferson City. And, they made it very clear that the intent, the point of calling themselves back is to deal with the situation with the governor and to decide what consequence, if any, there will be.
Another thing they talked about Thursday evening, David, was to continue the committee investigation. What do you think they could possibly come up with, and do you think it could have even stronger ramifications?
I think that Jay Barnes has showed a real diligence and focus in keeping a control of this investigation. But, there's a lot of things out there. There's a lot of talk about dark money. There's a lot of talk about, they were touched on this last report. It wasn't in the summary, but, foreign money contributions, other kinds of things that rise to a fairly serious level. I think it's good for either side, because I think that the process that we're beginning is going to give the governor his day in court. It requires 5 of 7 eminent jurists to sign off on it. So I think from a process standpoint, the House is doing the right thing. Jay has managed it very well, and that keeping the committee open will allow more facts to come in so that they can be addressed rather than being speculated as rumors. And so from that standpoint, I think the process has a chance to not only, I think it will resolve a lot of things, but I also think it will give everybody, each side, its opportunity to, instead of operating for a mysterious memo or innuendo or rumors, to put it on the table and have it in an organized trial that will give the governor his best chance to sort of answer these things and give the House and legislature the best chance to put forward the case of evidence.
Now, Jeff, I assume you read the second House report this week and all the exhibits. You formerly served in the House.
Right.
If you were serving today and had read that report, what would have been the most alarming thing to you as an elected official?
Just sort of these revelations that if true, that the governor has shown a lot of disregard, not just for our political systems, but apparently for the ethics that we expect of our elected officials. I mean, I think we have to give everyone their day in court. I advocate for due process for my cops every day when people want to rush to judgment on them. But this is damning stuff. It makes him look very bad. And, as David says, he gets his day in court to answer for these things, but he needs to answer for a lot of his alleged conduct.
Patrick, you work on campaigns probably every day. This must be great for you.
It is pretty good, but it's sad for Missouri citizens. I was really taken aback. It really shows the lack of integrity I think the governor has with he creates Mission Continues, this charity, which is supposedly his life's work to help veterans, but he's willing to jeopardize their existence for politics, because charities, they can take part in advocacy, ballot initiatives, and some lobbying, but they cannot support candidates in any manner. And he just went ahead and won. It looks like he took it without permission and with total disregard of the harm it could cause the charity.
Now, I'd like to come back to the mission continues, but something I've noticed, and I've talked to a few different people this week about how there's a lot of new things in Missouri lately. And one of those new things came up this week, and I'm looking to you two because both of you have known my boss, Scott Fawn, for a while, probably longer than I have. And Scott Fawn is a businessman. He has come forward and said he is the person who gave Al Watkins some money for the tape and the impeding legal services that might be needed. He's writing a book. What are you hearing from your colleagues? Do you think this somehow impacts the trial that a publisher?
Sure, I heard a lot for about a day, and then the focus shifted to the second report. People understand that regardless of what Scott did or what his intentions were or whatever, at the end of the day, it really has very little to do with what's going on with Governor Greitens. Scott Fawn, as I think he has said numerous times himself, wasn't in the basement with the woman. He wasn't forcing her to do things she didn't want to do. He wasn't keeping her against her will. He wasn't stealing donor lists from a nonprofit. He wasn't running a shady campaign. So I think just drawing that line of distinction, obviously it's a part of the narrative, it's a part of the story now, probably will be a part of the book, I'm sure, which I have pre-ordered my copy. So I don't know if you gentlemen have, but I'm sure they'll give you that opportunity here before we leave.
Rachel, I'd take it in a little broader perspective. A friend of mine, David Stillman, said that if you look at Reed Pulitzer about his life and the company and Hearst, and this is not unusual. It may be unusual now to Missouri politics, but the journalism has become a business. And creating stories, being able to write about those stories, to develop those stories in any way, shape, or form, is the world we live in. I think it's been the world we've lived in a long time. So I don't see this as anything extraordinary. It clearly, when you were the first to sort of uncover this and be part of it, it's more controversial. But again, we're in politics, and politics is a game of setting selective standards and bars on different people. You've got one group doing things with dark money against another group and vice versa. And so I think it's a little disingenuous. It's more of just the debate out there to maybe disguise where the real issues are going. But I don't think it's anything particularly unusual.
Yeah, I'm not that concerned with who's paying Al Watkins. I'm really concerned who's paying for the governor's defense team. He's the governor of the state. He's our leader. He's making decisions every day. Who is paying for his defense? Is that influencing the decisions he makes on behalf of Missouri citizens?
And on top of that, let's not forget that he has a New Missouri and other PACs, and we don't know who's funding them. And apparently, he's interested in dark money. So that's interesting. Did you catch that bit, Jeff?
This isn't dark money. This is light gray money. Listen, nobody knows who Scott Fawn is in Missouri. Nobody knows who any of us are in Missouri. They know who Donald Trump is. They know who Eric Greitens is, and that's what they care about. This story sells newspapers for Scott Fawn. If he wants to help fund this criminal case, the civil case for Al Watkins, then it's going to sell more newspapers for him, and people are going to forget in a day that he threw that money out there, and they're going to remember the revelations about
I will say, as editor, this has done wonders for our traffic. It makes me happy. I've got two great reporters, Ben and Alicia, who have more integrity than I can imagine. They've proven it to me every day this week. They are so proud of the publication they work for. But something that I think people tend to forget on a regular basis is we didn't break this story. I would have loved to have broken this story. Eric Greitens broke this story. So do you think if somehow Eric Greitens hadn't emailed KMOB a statement saying, hey, I had an affair, and the House had sniffed out just the ethics stuff that we found this week, or that the House committee found this week, do you think this conversation would be different? Or do you think the conversation about the affair was necessary in order to take it seriously? It's only a little loaded.
Look, governors, and I said this a long time ago, that governors have a honeymoon. They have an opportunity to sort of establish themselves. And I think that everybody would agree that in his vigor and, you know, energy to come in, he was running against the swamp and he kept running against it at the expense of a lot of relationships. And those relationships, as they piled up against him, created an environment that made this ripe. So I think it's you know, if he would have been rigid on policy but conciliatory personally, I think a lot of this would have been avoided. Patrick and I worked when we had the first Republican Senate, and he was in the governor's administration, Democrat, and no one really knew what to do, but there was a civility and a trust we established behind scenes, and that went a long way. And so I think the real sin here, no matter where we go down the line, is that whether you're governor, speaker, whoever, you're working in a system, and you need to respect the system and try to work with the players rather than run against it. At some point, you have to make it work. And I think that's really was where all this started.
So,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
No. You know, we Americans love to complain about the professional political class. And I think this is, I think what we're seeing in Washington, D.C. and what we're seeing here in Missouri is a perfect example of why we have a professional political class. I mean, when you look at the things they've done, I mean, you have Greitens, who's sort of a neophyte running. He's got a bunch of young kids working on his campaign. It's mistake after mistake after mistake that I would hope those of us in campaigns, we wouldn't have made those mistakes, the things that they did. And I think you see it in office too, because we would know, you know, hey, you got to work with your legislature and you got to get along with these people. And even when you have policy disagreements, it still can't be personal. And the governor has taken it totally personal.
In all fairness, I think one of the biggest things this shows is when you bring someone new who does not have any loyalty to a party, any relationships built in the legislature, or any institutional knowledge, that they haven't had that time to really, you know, look at Jeff Rorta and say, you know, Jeff, we can work on this, and I know Patrick and what's important to him. Those kind of relationships building up, going through a process of people who have started out as a state rep or a senator or been in it, are invaluable to govern. And I think that's one of the problems, is that because Eric did not have any of those things, his people, for the most part, didn't have any of those things. They're really blind going in, so they didn't know how to trust or who to trust or anything else. And it showed, and then taking an aggressive tone on top of that just sort of built it even worse.
Now, before we cut to commercial, Scott, I have a question for you.
Sure.
Because your name has been on the ballot, and now you work for people whose name are on the ballot. And you've seen how government works at every single level. And a reader came to me this week and said, you know, it's important to start at the bottom and work your way up so you truly understand how politics work. It might be hazing, but that's what you need to do.
I think, you know, anybody who starts at a lower place and works their way up, as opposed to aspiring to be at the top right out of the gate, I think you learn a lot. I think you learn the process. I think you learn the importance of relationships. I think you learn just how important it is to, lack of a better term, I think it's really important to figure out how to use those relationships to get things done on behalf of the people you represent. And I don't mean use in a negative way, but I think it's one of those things that without being in elected office, it's really difficult to understand until you're there.
Well, we are going to cut to commercial real fast, but we'll leave you with the economic indicators. And in case you missed it, gas prices are up.
My name is Eric Philippi. I'm a veteran, a carpenter, and a father. When Eric Greitens said he was going to change politics as usual, folks like me didn't think the first thing he'd do as governor was take dead aim at our jobs and our families' livelihoods by working to repeal prevailing wage. Call Governor Greitens. Tell him to protect prevailing wage and to protect my family, not destroy it.
Across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads, because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
welcome to the second half of this week's very special episode of This Week in Missouri Politics. In case you missed it, I'm Rachel Herndon Dunn. I'm the editor of the Missouri Times, and Scott is on some oceanfront property in West Butler County. I recommend rewinding and hearing some discussion about Scott, because apparently he spent some money as a businessman, and that's terrible. That was sarcastic, in case you missed it. This week, the House issued their second report. Actually, they issued two reports. They had an addendum to the first report. They said that yes, KS, the woman in the affair, is indeed credible. That the defense talking about how there was this lost videotape and that this videotape contradicted, they said no, that's not true. She is credible. And then they went ahead and released a report about ethics, about the Mission Continues list involvement on the campaign. What were your biggest takeaways, Jeff, on the report, and was it fair?
Absolutely, it's fair. First of all, you know, we had this sort of clash of the titans between Speaker Hanaway and former Judge Chip Robertson, two of the most respected attorneys and Republican officials that we've had in the state in modern times. And you know, Chip really kind of handed Catherine her hat, which doesn't happen very often, and he schooled her. I mean, this is a quasi indictment type procedure. It's very similar to a grand jury. You're not looking to collect the testimony of the accused. You're looking to see if there's enough evidence to indict, or in this case, impeach. And that's the role of the committee. Now, I think they've done it very even-handedly. They picked some really good folks with some having a law enforcement background on there, and others being attorneys. But I mean, this process has really been carried out in a very thorough and meticulous and respectable way.
Now, Patrick, I'm sure you listened to Scott's midweek updates, and he looks into the Stein of Knowledge. And it must have been a month ago that he said there would be attacks on Chairman Jay Barnes. Mm-hmm. And sure enough, they have started. And one that I thought was very interesting was that they're only getting one side of the story. But they've asked the governor, please come tell us your side.
Right.
So considering that the governor has not spoken to the committee at all, do you think the report is fair?
I do think it's fair. I mean, I think Jeff makes a good point. It is like a grand jury, and they're investigating, giving a report. They asked the governor to come talk to the committee. He did not do it, and they'll, you know, if the governor is impeached by the House, the governor will get his day in court to be, you know, to present his side. So I think it's fair. I think, look, you had a Republican House who did this to a Republican governor, so I think it's kind of hard to say it's a witch hunt, as he would say.
What do you think, Scott? Do you think it's a witch hunt? Do you think the report was fair?
No, I think the report was eminently fair. I think one of the things that I had actually heard from people was that they were surprised at the reports just being statements of the fact, you know, recounting what they heard in those committee hearings. There was no conclusion, there was no recommendation, there was no, this was a violation of this statute. It was left to the House as a whole, to us as Missourians, to reporters, to whomever read these reports, to interpret it how they wanted to interpret it, looking at the facts. I think it was very fair.
You know, something I thought was interesting, David, was there were tons of emails. And it said towards the beginning of the report that they went through 100,000 pages of documents. And as a reporter, it's refreshing to see so many source documents, primary sources. Like, I really don't think Mike Hafner went through and edited those. Do you think the report was fair based on what they had to work with?
There's a little trick here, and that is that, and to be balanced on this, is that if I were the defense of the governor, I would not want to lay out my case twice. I think I think it is appropriate for the governor's people to criticize the fact that they haven't had their day in court and laid out those facts. So, and those facts may change, you know, the view of some people. But with that being said, it's also unfair to claim that this report was somehow biased. This report, I think, is a factual representation, as Scott said, of one group of people testimonies on it. Clearly, the governor should wait and lay out his case at once. That's fair to him. With that being said, I think that what was done was strategic. That was my biggest takeaway. The report was strategic in the sense that it established for the first time very clearly potential crimes and misconduct while in office, which is a key component of moving to impeachment. That, I think, is the takeaway I have.
The other thing to look at, I think it's really important to distinguish between what's going on in St. Louis in the courtroom and what's going on in the legislature. And that is, in St. Louis in the courtroom, they're looking at the charges that exist only. These reports look at a whole lot more information. In St. Louis, they're looking at, was a photo taken and could it have been disseminated, via computers or whatever, the internet. And they're looking at, this list, this donor list from the Mission Continues and was it taken? Was it stolen? They're not looking at, non-consensual sex. They're not looking at holding a woman against her will. They're not looking at, the allegations of assaulting a woman. They're not looking at a false report with the Missouri Ethics Commission yet. That charge could still come from potentially Cole County and Prosecutor Mark Richardson. But they're not looking at any of those things. I think the House is looking at something that's, much larger than what we're seeing in the courts.
Jeff, something I'm wondering, and you very recently served in the House, and you served during times when there were a few different scandals. Will a special session reduce distractions?
Well, the special session will be the distraction. I mean, this is high theater in politics. This is unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this, and we're likely never to see anything again because people will learn lessons from this. But I mean, Scott's going back to his comments. The charge is very different. The standard is very different. The House and ultimately the jurists that the Senate appoint, their job is to determine fitness for duty, fitness for office, not what the courts are charged with, which is determining innocence or guilt. And those are two different standards, and you get to those questions in very different ways. But I think that at least when it comes to what the House is doing, that they're doing it in the right way. They're ferreting out these facts in the correct manner.
Something I thought was interesting, Judy Moriarty was the only other Missouri statewide official to be impeached. Mm-hmm. She was impeached by her same party, the Democratic Party, and now we're in the same situation with the other side of the aisle. Yeah. What do you think that perhaps Republicans can draw from that prior experience? Obviously, it's a little bit different, but there was mostly because there was one scandal.
Right, it was one scandal. Yeah, and I would, that's true. But it also is similar because you had someone else who should have never been elected to office because they were not prepared. And it's sometimes what happens when you have waves one way, a Republican wave or a Democratic wave. In 1992, they just elected every Democrat. It was a big wave. And that sometimes those are not always good when we have partisan elections like that because you get incompetent people in office. And I think that's kind of what happened here. I think what they can, I think they've learned from it, and the way they're proceeding, they're going about it the right way.
Interesting. Now, Scott, I was going to ask you, what is the procedure here? Obviously, they're doing a special session. That must mean that impeachment's on the table. I've had 8 calls from C-SPAN this week asking how it goes down, and I was like, I can't wait to tell you.
Without getting into all the nuts and bolts, because there's a lot to the process, but the Speaker has to recognize a committee, and that's essentially already been done with Representative Barnes's committee that has the authority to present articles of impeachment, or there are other consequences that could be presented. I think, we don't talk about those as much because I don't think that they're likely. I think it's probably impeachment that we're talking about. That committee has articles of impeachment that go through it. They take a vote. They then send it to the rest of the House to discuss, debate. I'm sure that will be a very intentional debate. It'll be a lengthy debate. They'll allow everyone to have their opinions heard. Because it's a very serious vote. There will be a vote of the House that requires a simple majority of 82 of the 163 members to pass the House, and then it goes to the Senate. The Senate's job is to find 7 jurists to review this case, and essentially the Senate then kind of steps back and they allow what is almost the equivalent of a court proceeding where both sides have the opportunity to present their case. It takes 5 of the 7 jurists to return any sort of decision. The process is prolonged. I would expect that it will take at least weeks and maybe months. I think it's a very intentional process. I think that anyone who had done no wrong certainly would have numerous opportunities to present an argument, convincing argument that no wrong was done, and the opposite of that is very true.
David, do you think the governor has an opportunity to prove that he has done no wrong?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you're going to have 5, you're going to require 5 of 7 jurists, and you know, anybody that's dealt with judges, you know, they are very independent, their mindset, everything else, no one's going to move them. They are operating without significant legal precedent, which gives them broad latitude. They could look at this and say, you know, look at it from a technical standpoint. Did he violate a law? Did he do something more? You know, turpitude is a very broad subjective term. So how they look at that is going to be fascinating. How they look at, did he specifically violate the law? You know, some of those things, it's going to be very interesting to watch from those of us that in the peanut gallery. But
speaking of those who have moral turpitude, David, who won the week?
Who won the week? I'm going to say Jay Barnes, because I think he brought up a very technically correct strategic report, and I think it, you know, it reflected well in the House.
Scott, who do you think won the week?
I think Missouri Republicans. In Jefferson City, I've been proud of my former colleagues and friends. They put Missourians above their party. They put the interests of the state above their own interests.
Apparently, I'm supposed to say someone, so I'm going to say the Missouri Times just because I'm biased. I appreciate everyone's reads, and I hope you continue reading the Missouri Times because we've got some great staff. Patrick, who do you think won the week?
I think you did, because I really like you as a host, and if we can keep Scott off on his beachfront property, writing what I assume will be a very short book, because he is from Butler County, but we'd love to have you here more often.
Jeff, who do you think?
Jay Barnes did not win the week, he won the year. He has etched his name in the granite of the Capitol building in a way that no one else has ever in the history of the state.
Thank you for watching there at home. Be sure you tune into the Missouri Times this week. I hear the governor is going to have a trial starting this week, and we will have as much coverage as we can have for you from the Missouri Times and also from the Clayton Times. Thank you, and have a great week. Brought to you by Spire, the Missouri Association of Career Fire Protection Districts, in Sterling Bank.